Well, thank you so much. What a rich 3 days. I really enjoyed all the discussions, and so I'm happy to offer some brief concluding remarks, really coming from a global human rights perspective. For the first, just 3 quick remarks. So the first thing I would like to say is really this idea that human rights apply everywhere. They concern all of us. And I think that means also including the global north in those discussions. And certainly not because we have the solutions, but to also understand how menstrual stigma plays out in the global north. And in particular, when we are doing global studies, I think there's a lot of potential to not constrain those to low and middle income countries, but to make them truly global. And from the work that I've done in Europe, I mean, we face huge challenges at the workplace in the context of healthcare. Endometriosis has been mentioned. And I mean, just a portrayal of menstruation, of how silenced and invisible it remains. And I think sometimes, I mean, it's much more, I mean, being here in Nepal, I mean, menstruation is certainly much more visible than it is in the Netherlands or in Germany. Second, human rights are under a lot of pressure, and they face a lot of critique. And I think partially that is because of the dominant narrative around human rights. Human rights are not only about the international instruments, the declarations, the resolutions. All these are important, but ultimately, human rights live in all of our communities. Human rights are what we strive and struggle for. And I don't see human rights approaches and culturally sensitive approaches as something that we should juxtapose, but we need to link them, and we need to see that communities are not a monolith, that culture changes, and we need to draw on that to realize human rights in the way that we want to realize them. And I think that's what I see sometimes missing from the discourse, that culture is not always a bad thing. We also need to think about cultural rights. We need to think about the right to take part in cultural life. And we need to acknowledge that communities often value culture if they get to define their own. So human rights certainly don't mean imposing values, cultural values on a community, but enabling people to make informed decisions how they, in their communities and as individuals in their communities, want to live their lives. So third and final, human rights provide a holistic framework. I mean, we've often heard that we need to look at all human rights holistically in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of rights at the workplace, in terms of participation in public life, all of those. And they're also intersectional in terms of looking at the varied lived experiences. I really appreciate a lot of the sessions over the last 3 days, and in particular today, to get to that diversity over the life course in terms of gender identity, in terms of disability, really not trying to present menstruation as this default experience. But I think we also need to be careful not to essentialize and not to overgeneralize, because not everyone's experience is the same. And I think we need to bring in more perspectives in terms of also looking at socioeconomic background, looking at caste, ethnicity, minority status, religious, minorities that really face entrenched oppression. And in particular, then bring in the movements and look at menstruation and menstrual justice in the context of broader gender and social justice movements. Because we benefit from linking up with the disability rights movement, with reproductive justice movements, with climate and environmental justice movements, the racial justice movements, and all the movements that are led by the communities that face oppression. So, and because menstruation concerns every sphere of life and concerns all of us, we will be stronger together in advancing dignity and menstrual justice for all. Thank you so much.